The hardest words to say are sometimes the ones that save your life. Claire Bennett stared at her reflection in the small bridal suite mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. Beyond the closed door, laughter echoed through the elegant ballroom of the Lakeside Grand Hotel outside Boston, where crystal chandeliers shimmered above hundreds of smiling guests celebrating her younger sister's wedding. Every table was covered with white roses. A string quartet played softly in the distance. Champagne glasses clinked together as family members congratulated the happy couple. It should have been one of the happiest afternoons of the year. Instead, Claire felt as though every cheerful voice outside only made the silence inside the room louder. She carefully adjusted the pale blue dress she had spent weeks choosing for the occasion, but no matter how many times she smoothed the fabric, she could not calm the uneasy feeling pressing against her chest. Her phone rested in her hand, the screen dark except for a single photograph she had taken years earlier. It showed two children smiling beneath an old maple tree outside their parents' first home. Back then she believed growing older meant life would become easier. Somewhere along the way, she had quietly stopped believing that. A gentle knock came from the other side of the door. "Claire," her sister Emily called with excitement. "They are almost ready for family photos." Claire closed her eyes for a brief moment before forcing a smile into her voice. "I will be there in a minute. Hurry. Mom keeps asking where you are." The footsteps disappeared down the hallway, leaving Claire alone once again. She looked at herself in the mirror and whispered words she had never admitted out loud. "I cannot keep pretending everything is fine." For years, she had become an expert at hiding exhaustion behind polite smiles, answering every concerned question with the same familiar response. She was fine. Everything was fine. Work was busy. Life was normal. She had repeated those words so often that even she had almost believed them. Until today. Until standing inside this beautiful wedding surrounded by promises of love made it impossible to ignore how lonely she truly felt. Her thumb slowly moved across the contacts stored in her phone. There were dozens of names. Friends from college, co-workers, neighbors, family. Yet none of them felt like the person she needed in this moment. Finally, her finger stopped on one name she had not called in nearly 6 months. Vincent Moretti. Most people in New York knew him as an influential businessman whose calm authority filled every room before he even spoke. Others whispered about the power he carried behind closed doors, but Claire had only ever known the quiet man who listened more than he talked. Years ago, after helping organize a charity fundraiser that unexpectedly went wrong, they had become unlikely friends. He never asked unnecessary questions. He never judged anyone for carrying invisible burdens. Before they drifted into separate lives, he had once looked at her after a long evening meeting and said something she had never forgotten. "If you ever find yourself with nowhere else to go, call me, day or night." At the time, she smiled politely, believing she would never need to remember those words. Now they echoed through her mind with astonishing clarity. Her hand trembled as she pressed the call button. The phone rang only once. "Claire." His voice was calm, steady, exactly as she remembered. For several seconds, she could not speak. Tears quietly gathered in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Vincent waited without interrupting the silence. He understood better than most that some people needed time before finding the courage to speak. Finally, Claire whispered the only words she could manage. "Can you come get me?" There was no hesitation, no questions, no demand for explanations. She simply heard the sound of a chair moving and footsteps crossing a room. Then Vincent answered with quiet certainty. "Stay where you are. I am already on my way." Claire slowly lowered the phone as the weight she had carried for far too long shifted ever so slightly. Outside the bridal suite, applause erupted as the wedding ceremony officially began. Inside the quiet room, she realized that for the first time in years, she was no longer waiting for someone to notice she needed help. Someone already had. Sometimes the people who change your life the most are the ones who never ask you to explain your pain before they choose to stand beside you. Claire Bennett remained inside the quiet bridal suite, listening to the distant music drifting through the hotel walls. Every few minutes, another wave of applause echoed from the ballroom below, reminding her that Emily's wedding ceremony had begun without her. She knew someone would eventually come looking again, but for the first time in years, she did not feel the need to invent another excuse. Vincent had told her to stay where she was. And somehow those 6 simple words felt stronger than every promise she had heard in a very long time. Nearly 40 miles away in downtown Boston, Vincent Moretti calmly walked out of a private conference room where several executives immediately stopped speaking. A multi-million-dollar acquisition meeting had been interrupted after his phone rang. During the past hour, everyone had watched him negotiate with his usual composed confidence, never raising his voice, never allowing emotion to influence a decision. Yet the moment Claire's name appeared on his screen, everything changed. His closest advisor, Michael Sullivan, followed him into the hallway. "Vincent, the investors are waiting." Vincent adjusted his jacket without slowing his pace. "Reschedule the meeting." Michael looked genuinely surprised. The board flew in from 3 different states. Vincent pressed the elevator button. "Then they can fly home tomorrow." The elevator doors opened. Before stepping inside, Vincent turned toward Michael. "If anyone asks, tell them something more important required my attention." Michael had worked beside Vincent for nearly 12 years. He had seen billion-dollar negotiations delayed for severe weather and national emergencies, but never because of a single phone call. As the elevator descended toward the underground parking garage, Michael quietly asked, "Is she in danger?" Vincent looked ahead, his expression unreadable. "She asked me to come." Michael nodded once. That answer alone explained everything. Within minutes, a black luxury sedan pulled onto the highway heading toward the Lakeside Grand Hotel. Vincent drove himself instead of waiting for security or a driver because he knew every extra minute mattered. He had not asked Claire what had happened. He had not needed to. The sound of her voice had already told him enough. During the drive, his thoughts drifted back to the evening they first met nearly 4 years earlier. Claire had volunteered at a charity fundraiser supporting children who had lost their homes after a devastating storm. When a power outage unexpectedly interrupted the event, panic spread through the ballroom. Guests complained. Sponsors grew impatient. Yet Claire quietly gathered volunteers, lit dozens of candles, and transformed what could have become a disaster into one of the most memorable evenings the foundation had ever hosted. Vincent had watched her spend hours helping everyone else before finally realizing she had forgotten to eat dinner herself. When he handed her a plate of food at the end of the night, she smiled with genuine surprise, as though kindness directed toward her was something unfamiliar. That smile had stayed with him ever since. Back at the hotel, Claire finally stepped out of the bridal suite after receiving another message from her mother asking where she had disappeared. She carefully walked toward a quiet balcony overlooking the gardens, hoping for a few more moments alone before anyone found her. Outside, the late afternoon sun reflected across the lake while guests wandered between flower arrangements taking photographs beneath white arches decorated with roses and greenery. Everything looked perfect. Claire wondered how so much beauty could exist in a place where she felt completely invisible. A few relatives noticed her standing alone and waved politely, but before anyone could approach, the unmistakable sound of a car stopping at the front entrance caught their attention. Valets quickly moved aside as a sleek black sedan rolled beneath the covered entrance. Hotel employees instinctively straightened their posture. Curious guests glanced toward the driveway, whispering to one another as a tall man stepped out wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Vincent closed the car door with calm confidence before scanning the crowded entrance. He was not searching for the bride. He was not searching for the family. He was searching for one person. From the second-floor balcony, Claire saw him lift his eyes across the courtyard until they found hers. The noise of the wedding disappeared. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them waved. Vincent simply gave one almost invisible nod, silently telling her the same thing he had promised only minutes earlier. She did not have to face another moment alone. A safe place does not always begin with 4 walls. Sometimes it begins the moment someone looks at you without asking you to earn their kindness. Claire Bennett stood motionless on the balcony as Vincent Moretti crossed the courtyard below. Wedding guests whispered to one another, trying to recognize the distinguished stranger who carried himself with quiet confidence. A few assumed he was a business associate of the bride's family. Others guessed he might be an investor or a local politician. None of them noticed that Vincent never looked at the decorations, the photographers, or the smiling crowd. His attention never left Claire. She slowly descended the staircase leading toward the garden path. Every step felt lighter than the one before, yet uncertainty still lingered inside her. She had not seen Vincent in person for months. She wondered whether she had made a mistake by calling him after so much time apart. When she finally reached the bottom of the stairs, Vincent stopped a few feet away, giving her the space to decide whether she wanted to come closer. He studied her face quietly, noticing the tiredness hidden behind carefully applied makeup, the hesitation in her eyes, and the familiar habit of pretending she was stronger than she felt. He did not ask what had happened. He simply said, "Are you ready to leave?" Claire looked back toward the ballroom, where music drifted through the open doors. She could already imagine the questions waiting for her inside. Her mother would be disappointed. Relatives would be confused. Emily would worry during what should have been the happiest day of her life. Claire lowered her eyes. "I do not want to ruin her wedding." Vincent followed her gaze toward the celebration before answering calmly. "Then let today remain her wedding day. The rest can wait until tomorrow." Claire looked back at him. There was no pressure in his voice, no urgency, only patience. For the first time in years, someone had offered her a choice instead of telling her what she should do. She nodded once. "I am ready." Vincent reached for the passenger door of his car and opened it without another word. He waited until Claire was comfortably seated before quietly closing the door behind her. Several curious guests watched from the hotel entrance, surprised that the elegant woman who had arrived with her family was now leaving with someone none of them recognized. Inside the car, neither of them spoke as Vincent guided the sedan onto the highway. The silence did not feel uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. Claire leaned her head gently against the window, watching the lake disappear behind rows of autumn trees painted with shades of gold and crimson. Nearly 20 minutes passed before Vincent spoke again. "Have you eaten today?" Claire blinked as though the question caught her completely off guard. She searched her memory before quietly admitting, "Only coffee this morning." Vincent nodded once and exited the highway a few miles later. He pulled into a small family-owned diner overlooking the Charles River. It was nothing like the expensive restaurants where business leaders expected to meet him. The waitress greeted Vincent by name with a warm smile, suggesting that he had visited many times before. They chose a quiet booth near the window. Claire looked around at the simple wooden tables, handwritten dessert menu, and families enjoying late lunches together. "I thought you would take me somewhere much fancier," she admitted with a faint smile. Vincent unfolded his napkin. Fancy places are usually too loud for honest conversations. Before Claire could answer, the waitress arrived with 2 glasses of iced tea. Vincent ordered homemade chicken soup, grilled sourdough sandwiches, and apple pie without asking Claire to make a decision. He remembered every meal she had ever quietly enjoyed during late charity planning sessions years ago. Claire watched him with quiet surprise. "You remembered?" Vincent looked almost confused. Of course. Those 2 words settled somewhere deep inside her heart. She had spent so long feeling invisible that the simple fact someone remembered what she liked to eat felt almost overwhelming. As the warm bowl of soup was placed before her, Claire wrapped both hands around it, feeling the comforting heat spread through her fingers. She had expected questions. She had prepared excuses. Instead, Vincent had given her food, silence, and dignity. After several quiet minutes, Claire finally whispered, "Thank you for coming." Vincent met her eyes gently. "Claire, I would have come from the other side of the country if that was where you had called me." She looked down, unable to hide the emotion rising inside her. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated across the table. The screen filled with missed calls from family members, followed by one new message from Emily. It contained only a single sentence that instantly tightened Claire's chest. "Please tell me you are safe, because everyone is asking where you went." The deepest wounds are often hidden behind the words, "I do not want to be a burden." Claire Bennett stared at the message from her sister until the letters became blurred through the tears she had been trying so hard to control. She slowly locked her phone and placed it beside her bowl of soup without replying. Vincent Moretti noticed the movement but remained silent. He had learned long ago that compassion was not measured by how quickly someone offered advice. Sometimes the greatest kindness was allowing another person to gather enough courage to speak first. Outside the diner window, the afternoon sun drifted lower across the Charles River as families laughed together on the riverside walking path. Inside the quiet booth, Claire finally took a slow breath. "Emily thinks everyone is worried because I disappeared." Vincent folded his hands on the table. "Is she wrong?" Claire looked down at the untouched sandwich before her. "No, she is not." Another long silence followed before she quietly added, but they are worried about today. Nobody ever asks how I have been the rest of the year." Vincent listened without interrupting. Claire continued staring at the table as though every memory she had hidden for years was suddenly asking to be heard. "I became very good at pretending. Every holiday, every birthday, every family dinner. Someone always asked if everything was going well." A faint, almost painful smile crossed her face. "I always answered yes because it was easier than watching everyone become uncomfortable." Vincent's voice remained calm. "Did anyone ever notice that your answer changed?" Claire shook her head. "No, because it never changed." She looked toward the window before whispering, "I convinced myself that if I smiled often enough, eventually I would actually feel happy." Vincent watched her carefully. He remembered that same smile from countless charity events, board meetings, and volunteer dinners. It had always seemed warm and genuine. Now he realized how much strength it must have taken to wear it every single day. The waitress returned with fresh coffee and quietly placed a slice of warm apple pie between them before walking away again. Claire laughed softly through her emotions. "You remembered dessert too?" Vincent nodded. "You always said homemade apple pie reminded you of your grandmother." Claire looked at him with quiet disbelief. "I mentioned that once. You mentioned it 4 years ago." She lowered her eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that someone had remembered small details about her life longer than she had believed anyone cared to notice them. After several moments, she finally spoke again. "Do you know what happened this morning before the wedding?" Vincent answered honestly. "No. Do you want to know?" "Only if telling me helps you carry it." Claire took another slow breath. "Someone I trusted spent months convincing me that every disappointment, every lonely day, every mistake somehow became my responsibility. Little by little, I stopped trusting my own judgment. Eventually, I apologized for things that were never my fault. I stopped calling friends because I did not want anyone to think I was difficult. I stopped visiting family because I was tired of pretending everything was perfect." She looked directly into Vincent's eyes for the first time since leaving the hotel. "This morning I looked in the mirror while everyone celebrated love downstairs, and I realized I could not remember the last time I felt safe enough to be myself." Vincent remained completely still. There was anger somewhere deep inside him, but none of it appeared on his face. Claire did not need another person reacting with outrage. She needed someone who could become the steady ground beneath her feet. He simply said, "You do not have to explain why you called me." Claire's eyes filled with tears again. "Then why did you come so quickly?" Vincent answered without hesitation. "Because years ago I made you a promise. I do not break promises." At that exact moment, his phone vibrated on the table. The caller identification displayed a name he had not expected to see. Emily Bennett. Vincent glanced at Claire before answering. On the other end of the line, Emily's voice sounded anxious but steady. "Mr. Moretti, I know Claire is with you. Please tell me one thing. Is my sister finally somewhere she does not have to pretend anymore?" The people who truly protect you never ask you to prove that your pain is real before they choose to believe you. Vincent Moretti looked across the table at Claire Bennett before answering the call. He pressed the speaker button only after receiving a quiet nod from her. "She is safe," he said calmly. There was a brief silence before Emily Bennett released a breath that sounded as though she had been holding it for years. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was afraid she would never ask anyone for help." Claire looked up in surprise. "Emily." Her younger sister's voice softened immediately. "I know you probably think nobody noticed, but I did." Claire felt her heart tighten. "Then why did you never say anything?" Emily hesitated for several seconds. "Because every time I asked if you were all right, you smiled and changed the subject. I thought if I pushed harder, you would stop talking to me completely." Claire lowered her eyes. She remembered every conversation now, every gentle question she had avoided, every invitation she had politely declined, every chance she had quietly closed the door on someone trying to reach her. Emily continued speaking through quiet emotion. "When I realized you had disappeared today, I stopped worrying about the wedding. I started worrying about you." Claire covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. Vincent remained silent, allowing the sisters to have the conversation they should have shared long before this afternoon. "I am sorry," Claire whispered. "I made everyone believe I was stronger than I really was." Emily answered immediately. "No, you made everyone believe you wanted privacy. There is a difference." Those words settled deeply inside Claire. For years, she had blamed herself for every misunderstanding. never considering that people could misread silence without bad intentions. Emily spoke again. Please do not come back today unless you truly want to. I can handle questions from the family. You deserve one day that is about taking care of yourself. Claire closed her eyes. Thank you. Promise me one thing. What? Do not disappear again. Claire smiled through her tears. I promise. After the call ended, neither Claire nor Vincent spoke for several moments. The waitress quietly refilled their coffee before leaving them alone again. Claire wiped her eyes and laughed softly. I thought I was protecting everyone else by hiding everything. Vincent gently stirred his coffee. Many people believe carrying every burden alone is an act of love. Claire looked at him. Is it not? He slowly shook his head. Love allows people to help carry the weight. Fear convinces us we have to carry it ourselves. Claire thought about those words as she finished the last spoonful of soup. It was the first complete meal she had eaten without rushing in longer than she could remember. Somehow the warmth of ordinary food in an ordinary diner felt more comforting than any expensive dinner she had attended over the past several years. Vincent reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a small business card on the table. It contained only a name and a private phone number. This belongs to Dr. Rebecca Lawson, he said. She has helped many people rebuild their confidence after spending too long believing someone else's version of who they were. Claire looked at the card but did not pick it up immediately. You already planned this? Vincent smiled faintly. No, I simply believe that courage deserves support. Claire carefully slipped the card into her purse. I think today is the first time I have admitted that I cannot fix everything by myself. Vincent met her eyes with quiet certainty. That is not weakness. That is where healing usually begins. As they stood to leave the diner, Vincent quietly settled the bill before Claire could reach for her wallet. Outside, the cool evening breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves across the parking lot. Vincent opened the passenger door once again, but before Claire climbed inside, she paused and looked toward the fading sunset over the river. Where are we going now? She asked. Vincent answered with the same calm confidence that had steadied her since the moment he arrived. Somewhere you can sleep tonight without feeling like you have to pretend. Claire nodded, but before the car could pull away from the parking lot, Vincent's phone lit up with a message from Michael Sullivan. It contained only one sentence. I looked into the situation you asked about years ago, and I think there is something about Claire's life that even she does not know. The truth that changes your future rarely arrives all at once. It begins with one small question that nobody thought to ask before. The drive into the city unfolded beneath a sky painted with the last shades of orange and deep blue as Vincent Moretti guided the car through quiet evening traffic. Claire Bennett watched the lights reflecting across the windshield, feeling an unfamiliar sense of calm settle inside her. She had expected guilt to follow her after leaving the wedding, but instead she felt something she had almost forgotten was possible. Relief. Vincent kept the radio off, allowing the silence to remain peaceful rather than empty. His phone rested on the center console with Michael Sullivan's unexpected message still visible on the screen. He did not open it again. Whatever Michael had discovered could wait until Claire no longer felt as though the ground beneath her life had disappeared. Nearly 40 minutes later, they arrived at a restored brownstone overlooking a quiet park on the edge of Beacon Hill. Claire looked at the elegant brick building with surprise. I thought you lived in New York. Vincent smiled faintly as he unlocked the front door. Most of the time. This is where I stay whenever business brings me to Boston. The house felt warm instead of extravagant. Bookshelves lined the walls. Fresh flowers stood beside the fireplace. Soft lamps filled each room with gentle light. Nothing about the home seemed designed to impress visitors. Instead, it felt lived in, peaceful, and unexpectedly welcoming. Claire slowly stepped inside. It does not look the way I imagined. Vincent placed his keys on a wooden table. Most people expect something much colder. A quiet laugh escaped Claire before she realized it was the first genuine laugh she had shared all day. Vincent disappeared briefly upstairs before returning with a folded sweater and comfortable sweatpants. These belonged to my sister when she stayed here last winter. I think they should fit. Claire accepted them with grateful eyes. Thank you. The guest room is at the end of the hallway. Take all the time you need. 20 minutes later, Claire returned wearing the oversized sweater with her makeup washed away and her hair loosely tied back. Without the carefully arranged appearance she had worn to the wedding, she looked younger, but also more tired than Vincent had ever seen her. She noticed a tray waiting on the kitchen island with herbal tea, fresh fruit, and a small notebook beside a fountain pen. "What is this?" she asked. Vincent poured hot water into 2 mugs. "When my work becomes overwhelming, I write down every thought I cannot organize in my head. It helps." Claire picked up the notebook. The first page was blank. "You bought this today?" Vincent nodded. "I thought you might want a place where nobody interrupts your thoughts." Claire ran her fingers across the empty pages without speaking. No one had ever given her permission to express herself without expecting an explanation. Her phone vibrated once. Another message from Emily appeared. This time it contained a photograph from the wedding reception. Emily and her new husband smiled at the camera while holding a handwritten note that read, "We love you. Take all the time you need." Claire smiled through fresh tears before placing the phone beside the notebook. "She really means it," she whispered. "Yes," Vincent answered. "She does." After a long silence, Claire looked toward him. "Do you ever wonder how someone slowly forgets who they really are?" Vincent considered the question carefully before replying. "I think it happens one compromise at a time. One apology that was never necessary. One dream quietly abandoned. One voice becoming louder while yours becomes smaller." Claire looked at him in astonishment. "How do you understand that so well?" Vincent stared into his cup for a brief moment. "Because years ago someone I loved disappeared the same way." Claire had never heard him mention family beyond casual references to a younger sister. Before she could ask another question, Michael called. Vincent stepped into the study to answer privately. "Tell me," he said quietly. Michael's voice came through immediately. "I reviewed everything you asked me to revisit." Claire was not imagining that she became isolated. Someone deliberately encouraged her to cut ties with almost everyone she trusted. But there is something even stranger. Every time she tried to reconnect with old friends over the past 2 years, someone else reached them first. "Vincent, I think someone has been quietly controlling far more of her life than she ever realized." Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stop protecting the story that has been hurting them for years. Vincent Moretti ended the call with Michael Sullivan and remained alone in the study for several quiet moments. He looked through the window toward the peaceful park outside, carefully considering everything he had just learned. Anger would not help Claire. Rushing toward answers would not help her either. She had spent too long living in a world where someone else controlled every conversation. If she was ever going to heal, she deserved to discover the truth at her own pace, with someone standing beside her instead of speaking for her. When Vincent returned to the kitchen, he found Claire Bennett sitting at the island with the notebook open in front of her. Only one sentence had been written across the first page in neat handwriting. "I do not remember when I stopped recognizing myself." Vincent quietly sat across from her without reading anything else. Claire gently closed the notebook. "I thought the words would be easier once I started writing," she admitted. "Instead, they became heavier." Vincent nodded. "Sometimes the weight has to leave your heart before it leaves your mind." Claire looked at him thoughtfully. "You always know what to say." He smiled almost imperceptibly. "No. I simply know what I wish someone had said to the people I cared about." Claire noticed the sadness hidden behind that answer, but respected the silence that followed. She had spent enough years wishing people would respect her own. After a few minutes, her phone vibrated again. This time the caller identification displayed her mother. Claire stared at the screen without moving. Vincent asked gently, "Would you like me to leave the room?" She slowly shook her head. "No. I think I am tired of being afraid every time the phone rings." She answered the call. Her mother's voice sounded exhausted rather than angry. "Claire, are you all right?" "Yes. Emily told us you were safe." Claire quietly replied, "I am." Another silence followed before her mother spoke again. "Your father and I have been talking since you left. We realized something that has been difficult to admit." Claire listened carefully. "We kept asking whether you were happy, but we accepted your first answer every time because it was easier than asking a second question." Claire felt tears gathering again, but this time they came from relief instead of loneliness. "I did not make it easy." "Maybe not," her mother answered softly. "But you were still our daughter, and we should have noticed that your smile kept getting smaller every year." Claire closed her eyes. For the first time, the conversation was not filled with blame. It was filled with honesty. Her mother continued, "Whenever you are ready, we would like to see you. Not to pressure you. Not to convince you of anything. Just to listen." Claire looked toward Vincent. He gave her the smallest reassuring nod. reminding her that the choice belonged entirely to her. She returned her attention to the phone. I am not ready tonight. Then tomorrow. Maybe. Whenever that day comes, we will be waiting. After the call ended, Claire slowly placed the phone on the table. I spent years believing nobody wanted to hear the truth. Vincent answered quietly. Sometimes the people who love us are waiting for permission to hear it. Claire drew a long breath before standing. She walked toward the living room window, watching the lights of Boston shimmer beneath the night sky. I think I need to stop hiding, she whispered. Not because I want people to feel sorry for me. Because I want my life back. Vincent joined her, but kept a respectful distance. Then we begin one step at a time. Claire turned toward him with a calmness he had not seen before. Tomorrow I want to meet my family. I want to tell them everything myself. No excuses. No pretending. Just the truth. Vincent smiled with quiet pride. I will be there if you want me there. Claire answered without hesitation. I do. At that moment, another message arrived from Michael. This time it contained a scanned photograph taken nearly 3 years earlier. Claire was smiling beside several close friends at a charity event, but one detail immediately caught Vincent's attention. Standing unnoticed in the background, watching Claire from across the room, was the same unfamiliar man who appeared in every report Michael had uncovered during the past 2 years. Healing does not begin on the day someone rescues you. It begins on the day you decide your voice deserves to be heard. The following morning, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Vincent Moretti's Boston home, filling the quiet rooms with a warmth that Claire Bennett had not felt in a very long time. She stood on the back patio wrapped in a light sweater, holding a cup of coffee while watching joggers pass through the nearby park. For the first time in years, she had slept through an entire night without waking to anxious thoughts. The peace felt unfamiliar, almost fragile, but it was real. Vincent joined her a few moments later carrying a folder that remained closed beneath his arm. Claire noticed it immediately. Is that what Michael sent you? She asked. Vincent nodded once. It is. She looked at the folder for several seconds before quietly saying, Do I need to know everything today? Vincent answered without hesitation. No. She looked surprised. You are not going to tell me? Only when you decide you are ready. Claire studied his face, searching for hidden expectations, but found none. He was not trying to protect his own secrets. He was protecting her right to choose. A faint smile appeared on her face. Thank you. Vincent placed the unopened folder on a nearby table. Some truths should never be forced upon someone. They should arrive when that person has enough strength to carry them. An hour later, they drove toward Claire's parents' home in a quiet New England suburb where the wedding reception had continued late into the previous evening. As they approached the familiar street, Claire felt her heartbeat quicken. She had imagined this moment countless times over the years, always believing it would end with disappointment or judgment. Vincent noticed her tightening grip on the seatbelt. We can leave at any time, he said calmly. You do not owe anyone more than you are ready to give. Claire nodded gratefully before stepping out of the car. Her parents were already waiting on the front porch beside Emily and her new husband, Daniel Foster. No one rushed toward her. No one demanded explanations. Emily quietly crossed the lawn and embraced her sister with tears in her eyes. I missed you, she whispered. Claire hugged her tightly. I missed myself too. Those simple words brought silent tears to their mother's eyes. Inside the house, the family gathered around the dining room table where holiday meals had been shared for decades. This time there were no celebrations, no decorations, and no distractions. Only honest conversation. Claire took a slow breath before speaking. For a long time I convinced myself that keeping everything inside would protect the people I loved. Instead, it only made me disappear. She spoke calmly, describing how she had gradually lost confidence in herself, how isolation had become normal, and how she had forgotten that asking for help was not something to be ashamed of. She never blamed anyone. She simply told the truth. Her father lowered his head as she finished. I kept telling myself you were an adult who would come to us if something was wrong. I never realized that sometimes the strongest people stop asking because they believe nobody wants to hear them. Claire reached across the table and gently held his hand. I am here now. Vincent remained quietly in the background near the living room window, saying nothing unless someone asked him a direct question. He had not come to rescue Claire's family. He had come to support Claire while she rebuilt those relationships herself. As the afternoon came to a close, Emily walked Vincent to the front porch. Thank you for bringing her back, she said softly. Vincent looked toward Claire, who was laughing gently with her parents for the first time anyone could remember. I did not bring her back, he replied. She found her own way. I only made sure she did not have to walk alone. At that exact moment, Michael's car pulled quietly into the driveway. He stepped out carrying another sealed envelope and approached Vincent with a serious expression. I finally identified the man from the photographs, he said in a low voice. The truth is even more complicated than we thought, because he has been much closer to Claire's family than anyone has ever realized. Home is not always the place where your story begins. Sometimes it is the place where someone finally reminds you that your story is not over. Michael Sullivan handed the sealed envelope to Vincent Moretti before quietly stepping back, allowing him to decide what should happen next. Vincent opened the file only long enough to read the summary. The mysterious man who had appeared in the background of multiple photographs had once worked with a consulting company hired by Claire Bennett's former employer. Over time, he had quietly inserted himself into social circles connected to Claire, spreading misleading stories whenever old friends tried to reconnect with her. There was no evidence of dramatic conspiracies or criminal schemes, only a long pattern of subtle manipulation that encouraged distance, misunderstandings, and isolation. Vincent closed the folder and looked toward Claire, who was sitting on the back porch with Emily, laughing softly over childhood memories. For the first time since answering that desperate phone call, she looked completely present. He slipped the documents back into the envelope. Some victories were not won by exposing every painful detail at once. Some were won by protecting the future instead of reliving the past. A week later, Claire met with Dr. Rebecca Lawson for her first appointment. She returned afterward carrying the same notebook Vincent had given her. This time, several pages had been filled. She smiled as she sat across from him in a quiet neighborhood cafe. She asked me to write down every decision I made because I wanted to make it, not because I was afraid of disappointing someone else. Vincent looked at the notebook with genuine pride. How many did you write? Claire laughed. Only 6 today. That is 6 more than yesterday. Over the following months, Claire slowly rebuilt her life one choice at a time. She accepted Emily's invitations without apologizing for taking up space. She had long conversations with her parents that were filled with honesty instead of polite silence. She reconnected with friends who admitted they had often wondered why she had suddenly disappeared from their lives. One by one, misunderstandings dissolved beneath simple conversations that should have happened years earlier. Michael quietly ensured that the false stories surrounding Claire were corrected through respectful conversations and documented facts, allowing the truth to replace confusion without creating unnecessary conflict. Vincent never demanded gratitude. He never asked Claire to stay in Boston or move to New York. He never suggested that she owed him anything because he had answered her call. Instead, he continued living exactly as he always had, making room for her whenever she chose to be part of his life, while never asking her to become someone different. Nearly 6 months after Emily's wedding, Claire invited Vincent to the same lakeside hotel where everything had changed. Autumn had returned, painting the trees with brilliant shades of gold and crimson. They walked slowly along the quiet shoreline until they reached the balcony where Claire had first seen him arrive. She smiled as she rested her hands on the wooden railing. I have been thinking about that day a lot. Vincent looked across the peaceful water. So have I. Claire turned toward him with calm confidence that had completely replaced the uncertainty in her eyes. When I called you, I thought I was asking someone to rescue me. Vincent remained silent, waiting for her to finish. She gently reached for his hand. Now I understand that you gave me something much greater. You gave me enough safety to rescue myself. Vincent smiled with warmth that few people in the world ever had the privilege of seeing. You were always stronger than you believed. Claire shook her head with a grateful laugh. Maybe, but strength is much easier to find when someone reminds you that you never had to face everything alone. As the evening sun settled beyond the lake, Vincent intertwined his fingers with hers, not to lead her forward, but simply to walk beside her. Claire looked toward the peaceful horizon and realized she no longer measured her future by the fears she had escaped. She measured it by the people who had chosen to stay. In that quiet moment, she finally understood that love was never about being saved by the strongest person in the room. It was about finding someone who believed in your strength until you could believe in it again, and together they walked toward a future built not on fear, but on trust, family, healing, and the simple promise that neither of them would ever have to walk home alone again.